Now part of the Darkcast Network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a Dark Side. On March 24th, 2015, Detroit police went to an East Side apartment at Martin Luther King Apartments to carry out a routine eviction. Court officer Lee Gordon and her crew entered the apartment and began clearing the rooms. The space was cluttered and smelled horrible. Just inside the door sat a small, deep freezer that immediately caught their attention. It was sealed shut with bags and other items stacked on top of it. As part of the eviction process, they were instructed to check all appliances. So, when they pried it open, they saw what appeared to be a human body with frost covering the face and a plastic bag laid on top. Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, your true crime podcast that tells you stories of relationships that turn deadly, always with the victim in mind, so you may hear some ranting and raving on my part. Speaking of my part, my name is Kai, and I invite you to take a seat, take a listen all the way to the end, and if you like my retelling, then don't forget to subscribe. You can also subscribe for free on my Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder, where you do get some perks for being a free sub. But I do want to remind you that Love and Murder exists because of you. When you join our Patreon at one of our bonus tiers, you're not just getting bonus content. You're becoming part of something bigger. You'll get early access to episodes, exclusive cases, behind-the-scenes extras, and ad-free listening. But most importantly, your support helps keep this show independent and gives the victim's story the space they deserve to be heard. If you want to be part of that mission, join us at patreon.com/Love and Murder at one of our bonus tiers starting at only $3 a month or above. On Saturday, I do have a story coming out about an interesting psychiatric experiment, so you don't want to miss this. This will only be in the Patreon and will be available to everyone, free and bonus alike. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. Now, let's get into today's case. But first, two side notes. First, horrific. Child abuse is discussed in this episode. Heavy listener discretion is advised. Second, this case was requested from Lamb listener Janelle Lavender Cooey 7074. Thank you for your request, Janelle. And if you have any cases that you want me to retell, you can actually go to the website murderandlove.com and just choose the option to request a case. It's in the menu under Contact, murderandlove.com. Now, grab your butts, grab your delicious glass of apple juice, and let's get into today's case of Love and Murder. Initially believing it was an older woman, Officer Gordon immediately called 911. When patrols arrived, they thoroughly searched the freezer and found that inside the freezer, wrapped in a plastic and bedding, were the frozen remains of two children. Quote, "I'm really sickened now to find out that it was babies. It's not an easy pill to swallow." The deputies immediately called for homicide detectives. The discovery was so shocking that officers on scene had to step back and regroup. One investigator later admitted that it was unlike anything they have ever seen in their career. Police searched the apartment and began documenting everything. The freezer was sealed again and tagged as evidence. The bodies were transported to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office for autopsies, and the scene was treated as a homicide. Neighbors stood outside as word spread through the apartment complex. No one could believe what had just been pulled out of the freezer. Neighbor Tori Childs, who witnessed the scene, said, quote, "The little girl had on a pink jacket. The boy was under a white sheet. It's so tragic. My heart hurts for them." Some had known Mitchelle for years. They had seen her around the complex with her children, but they had no idea that two of them had been missing. They did say the last time they'd seen them was about a year ago. Jessica Porter, who lived next door, said, quote, "I can't believe it. It's scary to live next door to someone you never really knew. It was just a normal family from the outside looking in. I remember how many times I was in that house, leaning on that freezer. I had never seen anything out of the ordinary." Detroit Police Chief James Craig called the case an active homicide investigation. Assistant Police Chief Stephen Delant said that the bodies appeared to have been frozen for some time, possibly more than a year. When the discovery was made, Mitchelle was nowhere inside the apartment, but a neighbor quickly told police where to find her. She was arrested without incident at another neighbor's apartment within hours. As she was handcuffed, Mitchelle said, quote, "It was just an evil act." She confessed to the murders during police questioning. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office couldn't immediately perform autopsies as the bodies were completely frozen. Spokesman Ryan Bridges said, quote, "The bodies are still frozen, so the autopsies are tentatively scheduled for tomorrow. Autopsies can't be completed while the bodies are still frozen. We monitor the thawing process while allowing them to thaw naturally so any potential evidence can be preserved." The bodies had to thaw for 3 days before autopsies could be performed. The medical examiner ruled both deaths as homicides and noted that the bodies had been hidden there for years. The first body was of 13-year-old Stoni Blair, and the second was 9-year-old Stephen Berry. Stoni's cause of death was multiple blunt force trauma, while Stephen's was multiple blunt trauma with thermal injuries, possibly burns. Their remains showed years of abuse, burns, scars, and broken bones that had healed over time. Mitchelle Blair was born in 1979. By 2015, she was 35 years old and living in a 2-bedroom apartment at the Martin Luther King Apartments on Detroit's East Side. Neighbors described her as standoffish and moody. Some said she could be friendly, but others said that she had a bad temper. She lived there with her 4 children, 17-year-old Gabby, 8-year-old Matthew, 13-year-old Stoni, and 9-year-old Stephen. Stephen Berry was described as quiet and sweet. He attended school up until the 2012-2013 year, when suddenly he stopped showing up. School officials tried to follow up, but Mitchelle withdrew him, saying that she would homeschool him. That was the last time anyone outside the home saw Stephen alive. Stoni Blair was 13. Teachers remembered her as bright, but also shy. Like Stephen, she stopped going to school around 2013. At the time, Mitchelle told people she was being homeschooled as well. The 2 surviving children, Gabby and Matthew, lived in the apartment the entire time, knowing that their siblings' body were hidden in the freezer. Gabby was 17 when the discovery was made, and Matthew was just 8. Both children were taken into protective custody immediately after Mitchelle's arrest. On the outside, it looked like a struggling single mother raising her kids in tough circumstances. On her Facebook page, Mitchelle wrote, quote, "Loyal to my babies," and wrote what she said, quote, "There is no greater blessing than being called a mom." One neighbor said Mitchelle, quote, "loved those kids," and even superglued their homeschooling assignments to the walls. Inside the apartment, the reality was very different. Her children lived in terror. The apartment was described as, quote, "trashed with garbage and food tossed about everywhere and almost unlivable." State Child Protective Services had substantial claims of abuse against Mitchelle twice before, in September 2002 and February 2005. But for some reason, she kept custody of her children. After the February 2005 Child Protective Services complaint, quote, Blair was referred for services through Family First, CBC Counseling Services, Eastwood Clinic, Individual Family Counseling and Psychological Evaluation, and Work First. The fathers of the children were largely absent. Alexander Dorsey, the father of the oldest girl and victim Stoni Blair, owed $39,000 in back child support and hadn't seen Stoni in 2 years. Stephen Berry, father to victim Stephen Berry, Jr., owed over $10,000 in child support and had last seen his children in April 2012. Now, the reason I said Jr. is because no report actually listed him as Jr., but his father is Stephen Berry and he's Stephen Berry, so it could be Jr. or the second or just Stephen Berry. But I said Jr. just so you could understand the separation. Mitchelle kept them away, and when anyone asked where the children were, she always had some type of excuse. For years, Mitchelle had subjected all 4 of her children to severe abuse, including beatings with wooden planks, extension cords, and hot irons. The 2 surviving children would later tell doctors and counselors they were abused throughout their childhoods. Neighbors occasionally saw the kids outside, but said Mitchelle mostly kept them in their apartment. Quote, they stayed inside with their mom quite a bit. Sometimes the only way we knew our neighbors were home by hearing them through the walls. Rocky Ashford, an 18-year-old neighbor, said, quote, I've been staying down here my whole life and I never saw them outside, to the point where I thought they actually moved out. Another neighbor, 10-year-old EJ, reported that he used to play with Steven, who he called Stevie, but the boy suddenly just stopped coming outside. When asked why no one noticed the two missing, officials pointed out that once she told the school that they were being homeschooled, no further checks were made. For years, no one came inside the home to verify the children's welfare. In August 2012, Mitchelle's abuse escalated to murder. She later claimed she became enraged after finding out Steven was sexually abusing his younger sibling. A claim, in all actuality, that was never substantiated. For 2 weeks, she tortured her 9-year-old son. She tied a belt around his neck and lifted him off the ground, asking, quote, do you like how this feels? She forced him to drink Windex, beat him, threw scalding water on his genitals, and suffocated him with a plastic bag until he lost consciousness, only to slap him awake again. She, quote, placed him in a boiling hot tub of water until his feet blistered. She tied him to the bed and beat him repeatedly with her fists and with objects around the house. For days, she attacked him in different ways, always accusing him of hurting Matthew. Steven cried and begged her to stop. At one point, he told her, quote, I'm sorry, Mama, but she kept going. Sorry, I'm just trying to get myself together here. On or about August 30th, 2012, Steven died from his injuries. Gabby told investigators that when Mitchelle found him unresponsive, she wrapped his body in his favorite blanket and placed him in the deep freezer. 9 months later, in May 2013, Mitchelle turned her rage on her 13-year-old daughter, Stoni. Mitchelle again claimed it was because Stoni had also sexually abused the younger siblings. In reality, Mitchelle became enraged when Stoni said she didn't like her two siblings. Maybe it was sibling rivalry, or maybe they had gotten into a short sibling argument. Either way, Mitchelle took this to heart. For about a week, Mitchelle starved Stoni, giving her only oatmeal and water, and beat her in the head with a 2x4. She also forced her to drink hot water. On May 25th, 2013, Mitchelle strangled Stoni with a t-shirt and suffocated her with a garbage bag. She then forced her oldest daughter to help put Stoni's body in the freezer on top of Steven's. Can you freaking imagine? I have so many words to call this woman, and none of them are even remotely good. Mitchelle later admitted that she treated the surviving two children differently. She claimed she killed Stoni and Steven because they had hurt Matthew. In court, she said, quote, she not only raped him, but she gang raped him with Steven. What type of to say about your children? She said she had to protect him, and once they were dead, she continued raising Gabby and Matthew as though nothing had happened. But the reality was that these children grew up in an environment defined by fear, violence, and lies. The freezer became the most terrifying part of their home. They admitted that they were scared to even go near it because they knew what was inside. Gabby said, quote, I was afraid to even walk by the freezer. I already knew that one misstep and this is where I'd end up. She told counselors that her mother burned her back with a curling iron, and counselors noticed that she had a visible cut above her left eye, which she said was the result of her mother hitting her with a plank of wood, and that her front tooth was chipped when her mother hit her in the mouth with a curling iron. So she was going to be next, and mother's acting like... Anyways. Matthew also had bruises on his back that were, quote, caused by his mother. How's she telling investigators that she treated these two differently? I mean, the only difference is that you didn't murder them. Yet. By the time police opened the freezer on March 24th, 2015, Stephen had been dead for nearly 3 years. Stoni had been dead for almost 2. Both bodies were still inside the apartment the whole time, while Gabby and Matthew continued to live under their mother's control. They remembered being forced to help cover up the murders. Mitchelle told them to lie if anyone asked about their brother and sister. Mitchelle kept them out of school, cutting them off from teachers or adults who might notice the abuse. They didn't have any friends over, and no one came to visit. Like I said, when relatives asked about the children, Mitchelle always had excuses. For instance, Stephen had run away, Stoni was living somewhere else, etc., etc. The kids knew these were lies, but they were too scared to say anything. They were trapped, living with the smell of the freezer, the beatings, and the constant threat of what might happen if they disobeyed. Child Protective Services records showed a long history of complaints about the family. Reports of physical abuse had been filed years earlier, but nothing ever followed through. CPS had been to the apartment multiple times, but Stephen and Stoni remained in that environment. After Gabby and Matthew were removed from the home, they were taken to the hospital for examination. Doctors found them covered with welts and scars from repeated beatings. Quote, 25 scars and injuries on the boy's back, both old and new, as a result of physical abuse by Blair. Numerous loophole scars and injuries on the boy's body, including his back, right buttock, and right hip. These injuries are consistent with Blair using an extension cord to physically abuse them. The girl has also been beaten with a cord and burned with a clothing iron and has burns on her body. After she was arrested, Mitchelle was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation by both state and independent doctors. Psychiatrist Dr. Shiner, who performed a competency exam, determined Mitchelle was fit to stand trial. Quote, she understood the charges, the roles of the people in the courtroom. She understood the penalty. She was initially charged with child abuse, but murder charges were soon added. During court hearings, she shouted in the courtroom, cursing at judges, attorneys, and even the children's fathers. She made it clear that she hated them all and that she wasn't going to apologize. At one point, she said she wished she had killed her youngest child too, because he was the one who had been abused. At a custody hearing in June 2015, while a video played of her surviving son describing the abuse, Mitchelle yelled out that he didn't, quote, see me kill Stephen because it was unintentional. But she also shouted, quote, everybody wants to know, yes, I did kill her, referring to Stoni. The prosecution told the court what happened to Stephen and Stoni. They described how Mitchelle had kept Stephen's body in the bedroom closet for days before finally putting him in the freezer. They said she did the same to Stoni in May 2013. Prosecutors used the autopsy reports and Mitchelle's own statements to prove how deliberate the killings were. Also, the state testified that after she had killed her children, Mitchelle continued to receive welfare benefits for them. Of course she did. She received $771 a month in food assistance and Medicaid through March, quote, accepting governmental benefits for 2 deceased children. The selfishness of this woman. She abuses her children, murders them, and then just keeps getting money for them. And she probably would have done that to all 4 and then just sat there and continued getting money for them. Mitchelle then gave graphic testimony about her crimes. Speaking matter-of-factly about killing Stoni, she said, quote, I punched her. I put a bag over her head until she lost consciousness. When asked about Stephen, Mitchelle admitted that she, quote, choked him with a belt, punched him, and burned the boy with scalding water. This woman doesn't even give a flying flip. She also said, quote, I don't feel no remorse for the death of those demons. If I had the chance, I would kill them again. Oh, God. She said that she did not initially intend to kill Stephen. Yeah, it sounds like it. Sarcasm, by the way. But it is what it is. She didn't actually say that last part, but that was basically implied. However, unlike with Stephen, Mitchelle admitted that she deliberately intended to kill her daughter. Assistant Wayne County prosecutor Karen Goldfarb testified that none of Mitchelle's surviving children had been sexually abused. Gabby also said that there was no concrete evidence for their mother's claims, saying, quote, "My mom became obsessed with this crazy notion." The defense didn't really have a case to present, but they tried anyway. Her attorney didn't try to argue innocence, but focused on keeping the trial short and avoided drawn-out testimony. Defense attorney Wyatt Harris maintained that his client, quote, "has taken responsibility for what she did." Where? Did I miss something? Lambs, did I miss something? Where did she take responsibility? She said she did it, but then she was trying to blame them for why she did it. So just because she said she did it doesn't necessarily mean that's taking responsibility. He continued on saying that she stood by her story that she believed her children were sexually abusing a relative. See? She didn't take responsibility. And you're sitting there, "Oh, well, she took responsibility, Your Honor. But, she did it because she believed the children were sexually abusing a relative." I can't honestly believe someone is even defending her. After 5 years of this, I shouldn't be surprised, but somehow I still am. Wayne County Circuit Judge Edward Joseph presided over custody hearings, and in July 2015, he terminated Michelle's parental rights. The court also ended Stephen Barry's parental rights. Michelle had testified claims that she had, quote, "never prevented the fathers from seeing their children." She said of Stephen Sr., quote, "the first time he popped back up, in 2011, he just showed up. Everybody could be dead and you wouldn't even know it." How ironic that you say that, ma'am. Quote, "We've had testimony regarding Mr. Barry that, to this day, he remains without housing. He remains without stable employment." The judge added that there was no significant bond between the boy and his father, and that it would take way too long for Stephen to establish a suitable home for his son. However, Stoni and Gabby's father, Alexander Dorsey, retained his parental rights. The court's reasonings was strategic. By preserving Alexander's rights, his daughter would remain a temporary ward of the court, eligible for services until age 20, rather than only until 19 if those rights were terminated. Neither father stayed in court to hear Michelle's testimony. Alexander said, quote, "I've been hearing her all my life. I ain't got to hear her no more." At a separate hearing in June 2015, Michelle stood in court and pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of torture. She refused to let her lawyer speak for her and, instead, reiterated everything she said in the custody hearing. Quote, "I do not feel any remorse for what I did to Stoni because she had no remorse for what she did to my son." She interrupted several times, speaking over the judge and prosecutors, insisting that she had every right to kill them. Judge Dana Hathaway told Michelle, quote, "They lived in terrible fear of you, and I find that so sad in this case. After all is said and done, you imposed the death penalty on your own children. You created a house of horrors for your 4 children." Then Michelle told her, "I did." Defense attorney Harris told the court that she was, quote, "abused as a child, had little education, and then had her own children." To which I say, okay. Then he said, quote, "I'm not making an excuse." Then why bring it up? If you're not making an excuse, why bring up an excuse? During sentencing, Michelle said, quote, "If I had killed Stephen intentionally, I definitely would be proud to say I did." She also told the court that one time she called 911 asking for, quote, "advice for a friend," about what would happen if a sibling was caught sexually assaulting another child. So is she now trying to blame the police? She also took this time to try and blame the kid's father, so everybody except her. Judge Hathaway sentenced Michelle to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michelle was let out of the courtroom still defiant, without a single apology. The case raised serious questions about how the system had failed them. Child Protective Services had prior contact with the family, but nothing was done that could have saved Stephen and Stoni. Neighbors admitted they noticed signs of trouble, children who seemed withdrawn, rumors of harsh discipline, and the general sense that something was wrong inside that apartment. Yet the horror inside those walls went undiscovered for years until the freezer was finally opened. This case, as with many cases of child abuse, is a reminder of how abuse can go unnoticed and how children's voices are too often unheard. The surviving children were left to rebuild their lives with the weight of what they had seen and endured, while the system itself was forced to confront its own lapses, which, is it really going to? A spokesman for Michigan Department of Human Services, Bob Whedon, said, quote, DHS needs to assess the risk and determine what action is appropriate. When abuse is sustained in the most severe cases, DHS will petition the court for removal of the children. But you didn't. In direct response to the Blair case, Michigan State Representative Stephanie Chang sponsored litigation requiring homeschool parents to register with the state. Representative Chang also proposed mandatory in-person contact every 6 months between homeschooled children and professionals like doctors or social workers. Quote, the idea is to make sure there are eyes on the kids a couple times a year. Alexander claimed that he repeatedly alerted Child Protective Services about possible abuse, but was ignored. Quote, they didn't care, period, because they gave them right back to her. That's so freaking sad and so freaking frustrating. In the end, the names Stephen and Stoni became symbols of both unimaginable cruelty and the urgent need for stronger protections to ensure no other children fall through the cracks the way they did. While Mitchelle Blair serves her life sentence, racking up dozens of misconducts in prisons for assaulting prisoners and guards, her surviving children have shown remarkable resilience. They were placed in the care of their great-aunt, Angela Gordon, a 58-year-old retired Detroit police child abuse investigator, and they received therapy. Do you realize how sad and ironic that is? They were this close to a police child abuse investigator, and this is what their mom did to them. I'm not blaming Angela, by the way. I'm just saying, can you just imagine they're related to somebody in this profession, and this is what their mom does to them? This placement provided an immediate sanctuary with a family member professionally equipped to understand the complex trauma the children had endured. Court documents later revealed that both children have done well in the home of their great-aunt and uncle. 2 years later, in 2017, Gabby, then 19, graduated from high school with plans for college, while her 10-year-old brother had been adopted around May 2016 and was thriving in school. Gabby had also enrolled in an independent living program to prepare for adulthood. They found hope and a future, finally free from the monster they once called Mom. Gabby said, quote, I'm happy I was able to make it out alive. Also in 2017, it was reported that Mitchelle had racked up 28 misconducts, with the most recent coming in October of that year. They include throwing urine on an officer through her food slot, throwing a milk carton at an officer, and repeatedly spitting on other prisoners. Quote, she's actually been in solitary since July 19th, 2015. As of this recording, I'm not sure if she's cleaned up her act and she's been placed in general population. Either way, if she doesn't get therapy and fix herself, I don't think she'll ever feel remorseful for what she's done. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comment or over in the Patreon. I always want to hear what you think. And I know you have a lot to say about this case. You heard what I had to say about it. I don't know. I think that woman has some type of trauma herself or some type of anger issue. Something's wrong with her and she needs to go get therapy. But I don't think it was wrong enough with her that she couldn't have gone to trial. Like when she was still trying to I need to get a mental health evaluation to see if I can go to, no. She knew exactly what she did. And nothing's wrong with her that it would deem her mentally unfit for trial. But something's wrong with her in terms of the level of anger she has, and she can't control herself. Like something is wrong with her. But anyways, those are my comments. I want to hear your comments. And speaking of your comments, let me read a couple of them to you. I actually haven't done this in a while. Now, these comments that I'm about to read to you comes from a case called DNA Solves Cold Case That Was Buried for 20 Years, the case of Coley McCraney. If you haven't listened to this case before or you forgot about it, then the link to listen to it is in the show notes below. But actually, this case was a bonus episode, and you could have gotten it at the $5 and above tier. It's always in the Patreon, so even if you join today, even if you join tomorrow, it's going to be there as a back case. So there's always stuff to listen to in the Patreon. Patreon.com/love and murder. And now a short synopsis about this case before I get into the comments. On July 31st, 1999, two 17-year-old girls went missing after getting lost on the way to a party. Their bodies were found in a trunk of a car the next day, both shot in the head. For 20 years, the case remained unsolved until DNA and genetic genealogy led police to the murderer. Like I said, this is the case of Coley McCraney. Just go ahead and join the Patreon at $5 or above if you want to hear this case. Patreon.com/love and murder. So the first comment comes from someone named Sweet Amber, and they said, "This doesn't sound right to me. Maybe I missed something. But the only evidence the article listed was DNA on JB's sweater and bra inside of her. How do they know this wasn't from consensual sex? The prosecution argued there wasn't a planned meeting between the girls and Coley, but how do they know that? Teenagers are pretty sneaky. They may have told the mother they were lost to cover their asses for missing curfew. Because JB was meeting up with a guy, maybe? Sounds totally plausible to me. That sounds exactly like something I probably would do at 17, which just so happens was the same year these girls were 17. They were also in the South. Racial tensions are far higher today than I remember them being back in the 90s. But that's not to say they didn't exist back then. So if JB was meeting up with Coley, there's a good possibility she would have been secretive about it. Possibly even lied to her parents about where she was going, what she was doing. This can't be right. The jury only took 15 minutes? 15 minutes? That's a man's life. Even if he is 100% guilty, I think his life and freedom deserves more than 15 minutes of consideration. 15 minutes doesn't even give them enough time to remember his name, much less go over all the evidence and facts of the case. Does this not strike anyone else as incredibly fishy? Another user replied to Sweet Amber. This user is JB Well. They said, the retracted story about the dirty cop also throws considerable reasonable doubt into this case. Then Felipe commented, I was born on March 2nd, 1982. These girls were my age. I feel so sorry for them and for their families. As for this man, I've had a hard time believing the consensual sex theory. Why would girls who were supposed to be late and got lost have suddenly decided to have sex with a random stranger? If they knew each other before, basically pointed to Sweet Amber's theory, surely there would be witnesses as to where they would have met him. They would have been on phone calls, on landlines, etc. There was barely any internet at the time. And if the two friends were there together, were they planning to both have sex with this guy? I agree that there's an alternate universe where the guy had sex with JB while her friend was watching, and a serial killer swooped in just after the guy had left and killed both of them. And if this is what happened, the guy is the unluckiest guy in the world, but frankly, it is much more likely that he's a liar, a cheat, and a murderer. And I'm going to read the last comment, and then I'm going to tell you all what I think. And in reply to Felipe, Caught the Planet said, making great points. The jury sat through the trial. They didn't have 15 minutes to decide. They had the entire course of the trial to come to what seems an obvious conclusion. LWOP was too good here. How do you think the people of his congregation feel after being provided with his guidance? This case is chilling. They're poor families. It's a horrific case, and these girls were put through the worst. I wish things like this didn't happen and girls could be safe. This was an interesting case. Thank you very much. You're welcome for giving you the case. It was very hard for me to go through the case. As with most of my cases, if not all of them, it's very hard for me to go through it. I was going to say what I think about this, but they basically answered Sweet Amber, which is, they didn't take them 15 minutes to decide because they had the entirety of the trial to listen to what was going on and make a decision. They had just to listen to what's going on and make a decision. They just made a decision before they even left the courtroom to go and deliberate. That's it. Everybody had made their decision basically based on what they were hearing. And for JB, it was clearly a blatant lie that he had consensual sex with this woman. Like, it was just clear. But I want y'all to listen to the case. If you're a Patreon, then just click on the link. If you're not a Patreon, consider joining so you can hear this episode and give me your thoughts on the case. Do you agree with the thoughts of these listeners, or do you have anything new to add yourself? Patreon.com/Love and Murder. And like I said, this bonus episode is at the $5 tier or above. Before you go, though, quick thanks to my lambs in Patreon. You're the reason this show keeps going. Our latest Deadly Duos bonus episode is live right now at the $10 tier and above, and it's a wild one. Siblings who turned on their own brother in a case that's as shocking as it is heartbreaking. And if you're part of the $5 tier and above, stay tuned. Our next Patreon-only drop is coming soon. Takehiro Shiraishi, Japan's Twitter killer, a manipulative predator who used social media to hunt his victims. It's one of the darkest cases I've covered yet. And don't forget about the Psych Experience report that I'll be putting out on Saturday, which will be available to everyone in our Patreon, free and bonus. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in the Patreon. If you're not already part of the Lamb Fam, join us at patreon.com/Love and Murder. You'll get bonus episodes, ad-free listening, behind-the-scenes extras, and you'll be helping keep this podcast independent and victim-focused. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. And like I like to end each full episode, I want to remind you that it's, say it with me now, all love and no murder, y'all. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.